Imagine a distinguished-looking man in a perfectly tailored uniform covered in medals approaches you. He is His Serene Highness, the Prince of an entire nation. He offers you an incredible opportunity to buy a plot of land in an earthly paradise where rivers are full of gold and the land is more fertile than anywhere else. And, as a bonus, you can become one of the first investors in this young, promising country's economy. Sounds like a fairy tale? That's because it was.
200 years ago, all of enlightened Europe believed it. London bankers, Parisian aristocrats, and simple craftsmen sold all their possessions to buy a ticket to this fairy tale. Their dreams were shattered on the harsh rocks of the Central American coast, where only swamps, disease, and death awaited them.
This is the story of a man who sold a country that didn't exist, one of the most genius and most cynical adventurers in history. His name is Gregor MacGregor, a veteran of the Napoleonic Wars, a hero of the South American Revolution, the prince of the state of Poyais, and the architect of a scam that shook the financial world of the 19th century. Welcome to System Breaks. Today, we will break down his system of deception piece by piece. We will see how a legend is created, how the propaganda machine of the pre-internet era worked, and why even the most insane plan can work if it's packaged right. This is a lesson that is more relevant than ever.
So, who was the man who pulled off the scam of the century? To understand this, we need to look into his past and see how the foundation for this grand deception was laid. Gregor MacGregor was born in 1786 in Scotland into the noble but impoverished clan MacGregor, a family history filled with tales of past glory and a struggle for survival undoubtedly influenced his character. Vain, ambitious, and craving recognition and wealth at any cost. His career began quite traditionally for the younger son of an impecunious noble family. He purchased a commission as a lieutenant in the British Army. But garrison duty during the Napoleonic Wars was too dull for his adventurous spirit. He was accused of fraud with regimental funds, and the future prince had to beat a hasty retreat from Europe. And here begins the most crucial stage, the legend-building phase. MacGregor rewrote his biography, washing away the shame of his flight. He headed to South America, where wars of independence from Spain were raging. There, he offered his services, first to Francisco de Miranda, and then to Simón Bolívar himself. A European officer with combat experience, albeit not the most distinguished, was a valuable asset for the revolutionaries. MacGregor quickly rose to the rank of brigadier general. He was brave, ambitious, and ruthless. He fought in several battles, and his main real achievement was the capture of Amelia Island off the coast of Florida, which he briefly proclaimed a republic.
But even here, he was pursued by a trail of scandal. He was accused of unauthorized executions, looting, and insubordination. His reputation among his comrades in arms was, to put it mildly, mixed. He was forced to fade into the shadows once again. It was during this time that he entered the service of the King of the Mosquito Coast, a chief of the Mosquito Indian tribe in Honduras. This was the key moment. Here on the so-called Mosquito Coast, Costa de Mosquitos, among impenetrable jungles and swamps, the ghost of the future Poyais was born in his mind. He saw the main thing. No one in Europe knew what this land was actually like. There were no accurate maps, no precise reports. There was only a romantic name, the Mosquito Coast, and boundless room for imagination. In 1820, with the experience of a real, though reputationally tainted, generalship and knowledge of an exotic region under his belt, MacGregor returned to London. But he returned not as a disgraced fugitive, but as a liberator hero of the New World, a friend of Bolívar himself. He carefully cultivated this image. He wore a lavishly decorated uniform and generously gave interviews to newspapers about his exploits in the name of freedom. The foundation of the legend was laid. An experienced soldier, a dreamy adventurer, and a talented liar had returned to civilization to sell it a fiction born in the jungles. He was ready to move from real battles to creating the grandest illusion of his life. So the legend was created. In 1822 London, a charismatic liberator general from distant exotic lands appeared. But how to turn this image into a working, money-making machine? MacGregor launched an unprecedented PR campaign in its scope and cynicism that is still impressive today for its thoroughness. Let's break it down, point by point, like a true Sistem breaks. MacGregor wasn't offering a vague dream. He created a concrete, tangible product, the state of Poyais. It had everything: territory, a paradise on the Mosquito Coast with the most fertile land and a mild climate. Capital, the port city of St. Joseph. Government, loyal and enlightened, headed by Cacique Prince MacGregor himself. Economy, limitless natural resources, gold, precious timber, cotton. Culture, the local indigenous people were peaceful and welcoming to European settlers.
To make the lie believable, MacGregor launched a veritable factory of fakes. A Guide to Poyais. A detailed, substantial book was published describing the country's wealth, its laws, and business opportunities down to the smallest detail. This was the main sales pitch. Official documents, fake government gazettes, official decrees, and even Poyais currency, elegantly designed banknotes that looked more solid than many real currencies, were printed. Maps. Detailed maps of non-existent cities, rivers, and plantations were produced.
After creating a buzz, MacGregor moved on to the main event: monetization. Government bonds. Through London brokers, primarily the banking house of Sir John Paring and Company, he began issuing bonds of the state of Poyais for the astronomical sum of £200,000. They offered incredibly high interest, backed by the countless riches of the country. Trusting investors, from aristocrats to shopkeepers, bought them up, as it all looked completely legitimate. Land sales. Simultaneously, he sold plots of land in Poyais. People bought estates hundreds of acres large without ever seeing them, based solely on beautiful descriptions in a prospectus.
But MacGregor went further than just selling paper. To give the scam irrefutable credibility, he needed living witnesses who would go to build a new life. He opened a Poyaisian embassy in London and began recruiting. Ordinary people, doctors, farmers, blacksmiths, were offered not only land, but also positions in the new administration: chief physician, port director, minister. They sold their homes and savings in England to buy a ticket on a ship, tools and supplies for a new life in paradise. The system was perfect. Money flowed like a river. Investors supported the hype around the Wonderland, which attracted new colonists, and they, in turn, by actually leaving, proved to the investors that the project was real. The vicious circle was closed. The trap was set. All that remained was to wait for the ships with the first settlers to reach the shore. That very shore which wasn't on MacGregor's map. In the autumn of 1822, the ship Honduras set sail from the British port of Leith. On board were the first immigrants, ready to start a new life in the prosperous principality of Poyais. They were seen off as heroes, pioneers blessed with incredible fortune. No one could have imagined that this voyage would end in a nightmare. Instead of the flourishing port of St. Joseph with friendly inhabitants and ready-made infrastructure, the colonists were met with a harsh sight. Before them stretched impassable jungles, swampy shores, and a complete absence of any signs of the promised civilization. On the site of the capital, they found only an abandoned and dilapidated Spanish fortification, which MacGregor had likely seen during his time in the region.
Shock quickly turned to despair, and then a fight for survival. No shelter. People were forced to huddle in dilapidated barracks and tents that offered no protection from tropical downpours and scorching sun. Starvation and disease. The provisions they brought with them quickly ran out. Attempts to cultivate the impenetrable swampy soil failed. Soon epidemics broke out. Malaria, yellow fever, and dysentery became their constant companions. Utter helplessness. Among the colonists were skilled craftsmen, doctors, and soldiers, but their skills were useless in the face of an utterly hostile environment for which they were completely unprepared. The local Mosquito Indians, contrary to MacGregor's promises of friendly natives, regarded the newcomers with understandable distrust. Although they occasionally offered help, trading food for tools, their efforts were catastrophically insufficient to save hundreds of sick and starving people.
The colonists were saved by chance. British ships, first traders, then naval vessels, occasionally put into the coast and were shocked by the scene they discovered. They found a group of desperate, emaciated, and gravely ill people living in appalling, unsanitary conditions. The survivors were evacuated. Of the roughly 250 to 270 initial settlers, fewer than 50 returned to Britain. Many died on the journey home or shortly after arrival. Their stories, backed by the accounts of the captains of the rescue ships, exploded in London like a thunderclap.
The tragedy of the Poyais became public knowledge. Newspapers that had recently praised the genius of Prince MacGregor were now filled with shocking details of the disaster. The story of a prosperous nation instantly crumbled, replaced by tales of suffering, death, and monstrous deceit. The trap MacGregor had so meticulously set for others had snapped shut. But for him personally, the story did not end there.
The scandal erupted in London. Newspapers ran exposés, an angry mob besieged the offices of the brokers' pairing, and the surviving colonists demanded justice. It seemed the scam and the fraudster's career had come to an end. But Gregor MacGregor was not one to give up easily. His next move was an act of incredible audacity. While the storm raged in London, MacGregor, sensing danger, simply packed his bags and moved to Paris. And there he pulled the same trick he had in London, proving that a good con never expires. You just need to find new, trusting listeners. In 1825, just a couple of years after the catastrophe in Central America, he opened another embassy, this time on the Rue de la Paix, in the very heart of the French capital. He began selling land and Poyais bonds again. And, most astonishingly, he was once again a resounding success. The French public, fascinated by the exotic and failing to learn the recent lesson from the British scandal, enthusiastically bought into his tales. He even managed to secure the support of several influential aristocrats. Money flowed once more.
The French authorities, unlike the general public, quickly grew interested in the prince's bustling activities. In 1826, MacGregor and his accomplices were arrested and put on trial. It seemed like the moment of reckoning had arrived. But his trial became one of the most bizarre episodes of his life. After studying the entire case, hearing witnesses, and listening to MacGregor himself, who with unshakable confidence continued to insist on Poyais' existence, the court reached a startling verdict. He was found not to be a fraudster, but mentally ill.
The judges simply could not believe that a sane person was capable of inventing an entire state with such conviction and detail and believing his own lies. He was sent not to hard labor, but to the famous Parisian prison hospital La Salpêtrière, from which, however, he was released on bail after a few months.
After the Paris fiasco, the scam finally ran out of steam. MacGregor, whose name had become a byword for fraud in Europe, found himself with no prospects. And here he encountered one final, bitter irony. In 1839, now an aging and failed man, he returned to Venezuela, the very country for whose independence he had once fought. And the Venezuelan authorities, remembering his old, and it must be said rather modest, military services, took him in. They restored his rank of general, granted him a state pension, and awarded him a medal. He spent his last years in Caracas as a respected veteran, an honorary icon, surrounded by an aura of past military glory. Everyone chose to forget that he was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of people. He died on December 4, 1845, and was buried with full military honors in the Caracas Cathedral. Thus ended the life of the man who sold a country no one could find and never faced true punishment for it.
The story of Gregor MacGregor is not just an amusing tale from the past. It is a fundamental lesson in how mass trust, the thirst for quick riches, and the power of a compelling narrative work. His scam became a textbook example, and we hear its echoes today. MacGregor brilliantly played on several eternal human weaknesses: trust in the symbols of authority, a general's uniform, medals, the title of prince. All this created an undeniable authority in the eyes of the ordinary person. People tend to trust those who look successful and important. The lust for easy wealth, the idea of buying a piece of paradise for a pittance and getting rich on untouched resources, was irresistible. It's the same mechanism that makes people believe in financial pyramids and guaranteed money-making methods. Information asymmetry. In the 19th century, you couldn't just Google photos of Poyais. MacGregor sold a dream about a place no one could verify. He was the sole source of truth.
The Poyais scam was one of those loud scandals that forces the system to change. It happened soon after the Napoleonic Wars, when speculative fever was raging in Europe. MacGregor's story showed the authorities and investors market vulnerability. Any charlatan with a talent for persuasion could undermine trust in the entire financial system. The need for verification. It became clear that issuing securities required at least minimal checks on the issuer. And the consequences. This case, along with other bubbles, pushed Britain and other countries to develop the first securities laws and investor protections. It was a slow step toward the financial regulation we know today.
Only the tools have changed. The essence remains the same. Instead of engravings in newspapers, ads on Instagram and TikTok. Instead of fake guidebooks, white papers for crypto projects and promising roadmaps. Instead of an embassy on Rue de la Paix, an official website with licenses from obscure island nations. Financial pyramids. Promise unrealistic returns using money from new investors to pay off old ones. Scam crypto projects. Create a fancy website, launch a token, pump it through influencers, and disappear with investors' money. Fraudulent ICOs. Issue tokens with loud, unsubstantiated promises to change the world, then abandon the project.
Gregor MacGregor was not just a swindler. He was a dark genius who understood that people don't buy assets, they buy stories. Stories about a bright future, easy success, and belonging to something great. His legacy is not the state of Poyais, which never existed. His legacy is an eternal warning. If an offer seems too good to be true, it probably is. The most important question to ask yourself before any investment is this just another Poyais? So, what remains of Gregor MacGregor?
The non-existent principality vanished into oblivion, his fake money and bonds turned into museum exhibits, and his name became firmly etched in history as a symbol of unprecedented fraud. But his true legacy isn't confined to archives. It lives on in every overly tempting offer, in every glossy package hiding dubious content. The story of Poyais isn't just a tale from the past. It's an eternal reminder that the most powerful force in the world isn't technology or politics. It's a convincing story that falls on the fertile soil of our longing for miracles.
MacGregor was a brilliant psychologist. He understood that people don't believe in facts. They believe in what they want to believe. He wasn't selling land or papers. He was selling a dream. And this algorithm of deception, alas, remains relevant today. This was System Breaks. We break down systems that fail and illusions that shatter. Write in the comments, what's the most sophisticated scam you've ever encountered? Why do you think people still fall from modern-day Poyais schemes? How can you tell a brilliant opportunity from a brilliant con? Like this video if you want us to keep breaking down stories like this. Subscribe to the channel. There are plenty more epic collapses and exposés ahead. See you in the next system.